The rot within when our own institutions forget who they serve. There is a particular kind of Jewish heartbreak that does not come from our enemies. Our enemies are not subtle. They usually announce themselves, sometimes with torches, sometimes with slogans, sometimes with anti colonial vocabulary they learned 5 minutes ago from a sophomore with a nose ring and a TikTok degree in Middle East history. No, the deeper heartbreak comes when the institutions built to defend Jews start sounding like they need a committee meeting before deciding whether Jews deserve defending. Once upon a time, the great Jewish organizations of America were born out of urgency. They existed to protect Jewish life, safeguard Jewish dignity, fight anti Semitism, and defend the legitimacy of Israel, the only Jewish state in the world. The Anti Defamation League, the American Jewish Committee, the Jewish Federations of North America, the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, local JCRCs, Hillel International, IPAC, Hadassah, the Orthodox Union. Some of these organizations have done real good, some still do. IPAC understands political power. Hillel, on many campuses, has supported Jewish students under enormous pressure. Hadassah and the Orthodox Union are not the problem. They are not perfect because nothing Jewish involving committees ever is, but they are not the rot. So let's be precise. The problem is not Jewish institutions as a category. The problem is twofold. First, the legacy establishment has become too slow, too cautious, too bureaucratic, and too addicted to access. Second, the progressive Jewish left has produced organizations and media voices that do not merely criticize Israeli policy. They have internalized the anti Zionist framework itself. The first problem is weakness. The second problem is betrayal, dressed up as moral sophistication. Let's start with the establishment. The ADL, federations, Conference of Presidents, and many JCRCs still have infrastructure, money, relationships, lawyers, history, and reach. That matters. But too often, when Jewish life requires thunder, we get institutional weather reports. We are deeply concerned. We are monitoring the situation. We call on all sides. All sides? My smoke alarm has more moral clarity when I burn toast. After October 7, Hamas murdered, raped, burned, kidnapped, and filmed. Jews were still identifying bodies when Western campuses began finding context. Hostages were still underground when professors discovered nuance. Jewish students were hiding Stars of David while activists screamed for intifada, with all the confidence of people who think history began on Instagram. And too many of our legacy institutions responded like old men walking through a museum with a glass of wine, careful, polite, terrified of touching anything. Yes, there have been lawsuits, complaints, coalitions, statements, campus work, and important advocacy. Credit where credit is due. But the frustration is not imaginary. Ordinary Jews increasingly feel that many of these organizations are braver in fundraising emails than in public confrontation. They know how to convene, they know how to host, they know how to issue statements. But do they know how to fight? Because the Jewish people do not need more branded concern. We do not need another panel called Navigating Complexity in Difficult Times. We do not need another leadership mission where everyone takes photos, cries at the right places, eats a beautiful dinner, and returns home to draft a statement with all the force of room temperature soup. We need courage, loud. We need legal pressure. We need donor pressure. We need political consequences. We need campus administrators afraid of failing Jewish students. We need Jewish institutions that understand the difference between diplomacy and self erasure. And then there is the deeper rot. J Street has long presented itself as pro Israel and pro peace. Fine, Jews argue about Israeli policy the way other people argue about sports, loudly, emotionally, and with snacks nearby. Criticism of Israel is not anti Semitism. It never has been. Israel is a country. It has politicians. It has failures. It has scandals. It has arguments so intense they make Thanksgiving with your most opinionated uncle look like a silent retreat. But anti Zionism is different. Criticism says this Israeli policy is wrong. Anti Zionism says the Jewish state should not exist. That is not policy analysis. That is elimination with better branding. J Street too often seems more animated by restraining Israel than confronting the ideology that made October 7 possible. Its public posture emphasizes ceasefires, humanitarian concerns, U.S. pressure, and criticism of Israeli government policy. Those can be legitimate subjects, but when Jewish survival is treated like one concern among many, while Israel's enemies are granted endless context, people notice. But worse still are organizations that have moved beyond criticism of policy into active opposition to Zionism itself. Jewish Voice for Peace openly works toward a Judaism beyond Zionism and says it uses American Jewish power to end what it calls Israeli apartheid. On October 7th itself, JVP issued a statement saying the violence was rooted in Israeli apartheid and occupation and U.S. complicity. That was the day Jews were still being hunted, burned, raped, abducted, and murdered. The bodies were not even cold, and JVP had already found a way to blame the Jewish state. If Not Now describes itself as a movement of American Jews organizing to end U.S. support for what it calls Israel's apartheid system. Its core framing asks whether Jews will continue supporting walls, bombs, apartheid, and repression. This is not a narrow critique of this or that Israeli government. This is a worldview in which Jewish safety through sovereignty is treated as morally suspect. Then there is the New Israel Fund ecosystem. NIF funds Israeli civil society groups, and some of those groups do legitimate human rights work. But NIF has also supported organizations like B'Tselem, which now openly accuses Israel of genocide and describes Israel as a regime of apartheid and occupation. When Jewish funded organizations help launder the language of apartheid and genocide into global discourse against Israel during a defensive war after October 7th, Jews are allowed to ask who exactly is being served. Teruah, a rabbinic human rights group, also reflects this pattern. It opposes codifying the IHRA definition of anti Semitism and has warned that the Anti Semitism Awareness Act threatens free speech and religious freedom. Civil liberties matter, free speech matters, but when Jewish institutions spend more energy warning about overdefining anti Semitism than confronting the anti Zionist movements terrorizing Jewish students, something has gone badly sideways. These groups are not merely too cautious, they are advancing a worldview in which Jewish national self determination is framed as oppression. That is the rot. Not disagreement, not debate, not the sacred Jewish art of arguing until the kugel gets cold. The rot is when Jewish identity is hollowed out and replaced with progressive permission slips. The same drift appears in Jewish media. Outlets like Jewish Currents have built audiences by framing Israel through anti Zionist and settler colonial lenses. The Forward, with its progressive tilt, has too often treated anti Zionism as just another legitimate Jewish viewpoint, platforming voices that question core elements of Jewish connection to Israel at the very moment clarity was most needed. When Jewish media normalizes anti Zionism as an internal Jewish debate, it does not heal the fracture, it widens it. And here is the part the boardrooms still do not understand. The Jewish people are no longer waiting for institutional permission. The fire has moved. It is on X, it is on Substack, it is in podcasts, group chats, independent creators, Israeli advocates, Jewish parents, lawyers, rabbis, students, comedians, historians, veterans, and ordinary Jews who woke up after October 7th and realized silence is not sophistication. Silence is surrender with better manners. The grassroots Jewish world has become faster, sharper, and braver than the establishment class. It does not need a 6-month listening tour to decide whether chanting for the destruction of Israel is bad. It does not need a consultant to explain that Jewish students being harassed, stalked, spat on, and excluded is not campus tension. There is a Yiddish word for much of this institutional performance, narishkeit, foolishness. Expensive foolishness, but foolishness all the same. The Jewish people need leaders willing to say plain things plainly. Hamas is evil. The hostages are not a talking point. Anti Zionism is anti Semitism when it denies Jews national self determination. Jewish students deserve protection. Israel has the right to exist and defend itself. Jewish fear is not paranoia. Jewish pride is not extremism. And Jewish survival is not up for committee review. The legacy institutions can still matter. They have tools, they have access, they have money, they have lawyers, they have relationships. But power without courage is just furniture. A big desk, a nice title, a gala invitation, a name badge. Meanwhile, the Jewish people are fighting in real time. We are fighting lies with receipts. We are fighting propaganda with memory. We are fighting hatred with humor because, frankly, if Jews stopped laughing, the world would become unbearable and deli prices would somehow still go up. So the message is simple. To the legacy organizations, wake up. To the ideological arsonists speaking in our name, stop pretending you are saving Judaism by helping dismantle Jewish sovereignty. And to every Jew who feels abandoned by the institutions that were supposed to defend us, you are not crazy. You are watching a changing of the guard. The fire did not go out, it just left the boardroom. If you enjoy my writing, support me by buying my book, Screaming into the Void, available on paperback or Kindle on Amazon.com.